Okay, so good morning, everybody. And we have arrived at meteorological spring, as they say. March 1st is always the beginning of spring. So seeing from the weather forecast, we have one more taste of a cold spell coming up this weekend, but it looks like from my long range forecast on my phone that will be in the 60s next week. So that'll be nice. And hopefully that'll stay for Pesach, which is just around the corner. So this morning's portion is Tissa, found in our Chumash beginning on page 523. 523 in Eitz Chaim, whatever edition of Chumash you're using, it's Exodus 30, beginning with verse 11. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. The portion begins with concluding a description of how the Mishkan is to be fashioned. We have the commandment for an annual upkeep tax, that kind of like membership dues that are described here, that everybody over the age of 20, so you become a member of the Mishkan from the age of 20, and you have to, you're obligated, no matter your income level, to give a half a shekel. Doesn't matter how much a half shekel actually is worth today, but a half a shekel is substantial enough that if everyone gave it, that'd be more than enough to take care of the needs of the Mishkan. And it's it's not too much that it's overbearing for the most impoverished in the community. So half shekel tax is delineated here. We read this a couple of weeks ago, this very first section, these first 5-6 verses in the special Shabbat of Shkalim. So the half shekel tax was collected the first of Adar. So that would be the last month of the year before the new year began in Nisan, 1 month later. So that was essentially the tax season. You had a month to collect the tax. So it was like the April 15th of the year. So that we're told about the half shekel tax, and then the laver for the Kohanim to wash their hands is described, and then also the incense and how that is to be done as well. So then in chapter 31, we're told that Moses is to call on Bezalel. So let's take a look at chapter 31 for a moment, page 527 in the Eitz Chaim. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, God spoke to Moses saying, that's just interesting again. Remember last week's portion, Tetzaveh, God didn't speak to Moses directly by name. God referred to Moses, ve'ata, and you. Here it's back to God spoke to Moses saying. So scholars could try to explain why Tetzaveh is unusual in essentially God saying, hey, you, to Moses, and then going back to a more formal style here in Tissa. Don't know. So that's why it led to that homiletical lesson related to Moses's yahrzeit, but it's just an unusual style. Verse 2, Re'eh karati v'shem, behold, or see, I have, it says here, I have singled out by name. I called by name, simply. I called by name Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur. Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. Va'amalei oto, and I have filled him, Ruach Elohim b'chochma uvitvuna uveda'at uvechol melacha. And I have filled Bezalel. So I've called on Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with, that is, I'm adding that is with wisdom and understanding and knowledge. That's how I'm translating the words. It says here skill, ability, and knowledge. Uvechol melacha, in, it says here in every kind of craft. So I would go with that because Bezalel here is assigned as the chief artisan for now bringing the design that we've just read from this portion, last week's portion, and the week before into reality. Like, so we have the blueprint. It's up to the artisan to bring that blueprint to life. So it's like the engineers, the architects making the design, and then the construction company, but it's more than that. It's the construction company that has to fill out the plans of the blueprint, but it's here for the Mishkan, it has an artistic touch. So yeah, we're told that the vestments of the Kohanim have to be made with a particular fabric, a particular dye, particular kinds of material used in the fabric, but it's up to the artisan to bring that to life. So, and that artisan, Bezalel, needs wisdom, understanding, and knowledge of all these crafts in order to bring this to life. It's like Stradivarius with a violin or Steinway with a piano. There are lots of pianos out there, but the concert pianists prefer a Steinway just because of how Steinway makes the piano, right? You know the design of a piano, but it takes a particular artistic touch to get just the right sound to come out of the piano so that Bach or Beethoven can come to life. The same with a violin. Violinists swear by Stradivarius. So you could say that with every musical instrument. You know how to do it, like a guitar. You know how to make it, but it's just using the right wood, using the right thickness, varnishing it just the right way, so that, and using the strings and tightening it just the right way so that the most perfect sound can come out of it. So that's essentially what's happening with Bezalel here, and that Bezalel is further endowed by God with the talents to be able to do this. And verse 4 continues, what are the skills that he has? Lachashov machashavot, to think thoughts, la'asot b'zahav uvekesef uvanechoshet, to work with gold, silver, and copper, uvacharoshet even, and to hew stones, lemalot, well, it says here in the English, to cut stones for setting, uvacharoshet eights, and to carve wood, la'asot b'chol melacha. So, you know, in other words, there are artisans. You have bricklayers or stonemasons who just know what they're doing about that. But you wouldn't imagine a stonemason would also know how to be a seamstress. So what's happening here is Bezalel is becoming the expert in all possible crafts that were necessary for the design of the Mishkan. So that's unusual, if not never heard of before. You would never go to a jeweler to ask a jeweler to design an apron or an ark cover. You just wouldn't do that. But here, Bezalel was endowed by God with all of these skills. And God's assigning to him a deputy. Va'ani, verse 6, hine natati ito et Oholiav ben Achisamach lemate Dan. Oholiav, son of Achisamach of the tribe of Dan, uvelev kol chacham lev natati chochma, and I have also granted skill to all who are skillful. V'asu et kol asher tziviticha, and they will do everything that I have commanded you. So there is one comment here about Bezalel being from the tribe of Judah and Oholiav from the tribe of Dan. The commentary points out that Judah is the largest tribe, Dan is the smallest tribe, and to have a representative of both is thereby being inclusive of the entire nation of Israel, in that they can say that they were vested into the design of the Mishkan. If you have somebody from the biggest tribe, somebody from the smallest tribe, then it's essentially somebody, the entire people of Israel are represented in the construction, the design and the construction of the Mishkan. Okay, and so that goes on exactly what they're making, everything that's been described until this point. And now, chapter 31 ends, verse 12 to 18, with the following. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, we're on 528 in the middle, chapter 31, verse 13. Ve'ata daber el bnei Yisrael lemor, you speak to the people of Israel, saying, Ach et shabtotai tishmoru, verily or surely my Sabbaths you shall observe. It says here in the English, nevertheless. So the word ach there, so below the line, nevertheless. So I translate it as verily or surely. Based on this phrase and the passage that precedes it, the sages derive their definition of work that is forbidden on Shabbat from the tasks involved in constructing the tabernacle. Okay, so everything that's to be designed and constructed is described here through verse 11. And now there's the commandment to observe Shabbat. So it's based on this juxtaposition of the commandment to observe Shabbat with the description of everything that's made, that the rabbis derive the very complicated and diverse laws of Shabbat. So they say from all the works that are described here that would be necessary for building the Mishkan, those are 39 categories of work. There are 39 categories of work that were involved in building the Mishkan, and those are 39 categories that are the categories of work from which all manner of work would be derived, that would be forbidden to do on Shabbat. Okay, so there are certain things that are allowed to override Shabbat for saving a human life, but otherwise work is forbidden on Shabbat. So, it just raises the whole idea of how to observe Shabbat. Do we observe Shabbat in a positive way, like we are looking forward to resting on Shabbat and the spirituality of Shabbat and the spiritual rejuvenation of Shabbat? Or are we seeing it as everything that we are forbidden from doing? Are we seeing it as restrictions that are about to be imposed for 25 hours, right? Because candlelighting is at sunset and Shabbat is over at nightfall the next day. So it's 25 hours of refraining from work or spiritual rejuvenation, right? So it's a matter of perspective. So the critics about how much of an imposition it is and how difficult it is to observe Shabbat would say, look at all these restrictions and how it's impossible to do this without making a mistake. And am I going to do this right? And the more traditional the community you're in, the more restrictions there are. And you can go, let me just give you an example. Within very traditional communities, there will be those who will unscrew the light bulb that's inside your refrigerator. Okay, so work on Shabbat is lighting a fire. So today, electricity, when you flip a switch, you're not lighting a fire. But for the very traditional, the electricity comes to serve the same purpose as fire. So if it's serving the same purpose, then it's the exact same thing, and we shouldn't use it on Shabbat. So if you can't use electricity on Shabbat, and you can't light a fire on Shabbat, then that poses a problem with opening your refrigerator. So if you open your refrigerator to get food, there's nothing wrong with that. But there are a couple of problems that could be involved with that. One is if you leave the refrigerator open too long, then you are affecting the temperature inside the refrigerator, so that when you close the door of the refrigerator, you're causing the cooling system of the refrigerator, the engine, to turn on to start cooling it again, so that you have indirectly caused the thermostat to be engaged and the cooling system to be engaged in the refrigerator. So you're making the refrigerator do work if you're opening the refrigerator and keeping it open too long. That's number one. And number two, by opening the refrigerator, you're turning on a light. Now, in my refrigerator, I have an LED light in it, and it doesn't have, well, I don't think it's a regular light bulb. It looks almost impossible, because I haven't tried, to take the cover off where the LED lights are in order to undo the lights. Now, I must say, I have never unscrewed the light bulb inside my refrigerator, because I do use electricity on Shabbat. I just don't use it to do work. I use it for lights. I just don't use it to do work. But in the Orthodox world, there is no distinction. Electricity is electricity. You can't use it on Shabbat. So then the restriction becomes that much more restrictive, so that you take the light bulb out of the refrigerator. So even though your intention is not to read a book by the light of the light bulb that's in the refrigerator, right? You're not opening the refrigerator in order to use the light. You're opening the refrigerator to take out whatever you need, an apple or a grapefruit or whatever it is you're taking out of the refrigerator. So the inadvertent work of turning on a light bulb is still prohibited on Shabbat as well. So I'm just saying this is just one example of how within the very traditional world of the Jewish community, the prohibition of doing work on Shabbat can be carried to such an extent that it makes everything we do on Shabbat something to be thinking about, whether we're doing something wrong or something right, as opposed to really what the spirit of Shabbat is supposed to be, to refrain from anything creative. How do we translate the word melacha, which is forbidden on Shabbat? Work. What kind of work, in quotes like that, are we forbidden? Is it physical labor? Is that how we translate the word melacha? Is it physical labor? Is it something creative that we are doing on Shabbat? Is that what's prohibited on Shabbat? So it broadens the definition of what work means if we say that it's something creative. So work in so in other words, taking a photograph on Shabbat is prohibited. And we wouldn't say that there was work involved in taking a picture, right? So if the most common way to take a picture is to take a cell phone, to turn on the camera setting of the phone and just press a button and take a picture. What kind of work, physical labor, is involved in that? There is no work. But by taking a picture, you're creating a permanent image. And creating something permanent is forbidden on Shabbat. So we could say a lot more about this, and there could be weeks that we could spend on all the laws of Shabbat, and we're not going to do that now. I'm just bringing this up here, and there's a couple of examples of opening a refrigerator on Shabbat or using your phone to take a picture on Shabbat as examples of work as defined by the rabbis here in making the connection as the Torah does from going to defining all the things that were made in the Mishkan to the very next paragraph of observing Shabbat, and the rabbis then deriving all the restrictions related to Shabbat. So that is why for some people today in the Jewish community, that that work as we know it should be redefined. Like in Israel today, the businesses that are closed on Shabbat and public transportation is closed on Shabbat is all based on the chief rabbinate of Israel deciding what the laws of Shabbat are to the 80% of the population that are not defined as Orthodox. So that there are many Jews in Israel today who will get in their car and drive to the beach, who will hire a taxi and go to the beach. There are some, like the Israel Museum is open on Shabbat in Jerusalem. There are other museums across the country, and depending on the community, maybe some cinemas are open on Shabbat. This is pre-COVID, of course. So there's a whole debate in Israeli society about the imposition of Orthodox lifestyle on the non-Orthodox in Israel on Shabbat. And is that fair, right? So should public transportation be conducted on Shabbat? Well, maybe some people want to have, maybe the bus drivers want to be off on Shabbat. So whatever it is, there's tremendous debate in Israel about the impact the Orthodox has on the lifestyle of the average Israeli. It just came out again this week with conversions that are done in Israel today. The Supreme Court of Israel got involved and said that conversions conducted, officiated by Reform and conservative rabbis are to be recognized in Israel. So conversions that happen outside of Israel, even like someone that I officiated their conversion, theoretically, they can become citizens of Israel with an appropriate letter. So it could be like, it depends. Some conservative conversions are recognized in Israel. Some are not. It depends on what list you're on, whatever. In Israel, if a conversion happens in Israel, it had been happening by the Orthodox chief rabbinate. Now this Supreme Court decision has been passed. But because it's election season in Israel, one of the ultra-Orthodox parties just came out with a video, a campaign video, where somebody is putting a kippah on a dog and saying that as they're putting the kippah on the dog, look what the conservative movement has done, because conservative and Reform Jews are like dogs, and it's like making a dog Jewish. And how can we do that? And we're going to make sure, if you elect us, the Union for UTJ party or UTC, United Torah Judaism, something like that, whatever that party is saying, we're going to make sure in the Knesset to legislate that only Orthodox conversions are permitted in Israel. So even though the Supreme Court has said that conversions can happen by non-Orthodox, the Knesset will have the final say. Anyway, all of this by tangent on Shabbat and the restrictions of Shabbat laws that are imposed by the rabbis. What I want to do for the rest of the time today is now take a look at chapter 32. And this is really the bulk of this, of Tissa, and that this is the incident with a golden calf. And I want to, I just want to spend a few moments talking about the beginning of this portion. So let's look at it together on 529. Chapter 32, Vayar ha'am, the people saw, ki voshesh Moshe laredet minahar, that Moses is delayed from coming down the mountain. Now, first of all, how do we know? How do the people know that he's delayed? So the understanding is that everybody knew that he was supposed to be up there for 40 days and 40 nights. So how delayed was he? Is it the 41st day already? Where's Moses? Is it the 42nd day? No. Where's Moses? What's going on? Like how much of a delay is it? We don't know until there. So vayikahel ha'am al Aharon. So the people gathered in front of Aaron. Right. So how long did it take in Moses's delay for the people to gather in front of Aaron? Vayomru, and they said, Vayomru Elav, and they said to him, I'm on page 530 now, Kum aselanu Elohim, get up and make for us a God, asher yelchu lefanenu, that will go before us. Now it's in the plural, because Elohim is a plural word. So make for us God or gods that will go before us, Kizeh Moshe Ha'ish, because this Moses fellow, really, that's how you can translate it. This Moses guy, Asher He'elanu me'eretz Mitzrayim, who brought us out of the land of Egypt, Lo yadanu mehayalo. We don't know what happened to him. So Aaron, make for us a substitute for Moses, this Moses guy who took us out of Egypt, because we don't know what happened to him. So again, how long after this after the 40th day did this happen? And what is this supposed to be? This replacement to Moses? Why didn't they say, Aaron, you take over? We're kind of lost here without Moses telling us what to do. Why don't you take over, Aaron? They don't say that. Why don't you make for us another God to take Moses's place? So verse 2, Vayomer alehem Aharon, Aaron says to them, Parku nizmei hazahav, asher ba'oznei nashechem. Take off the gold rings that are in the ears of your wives, and b'nechem uvenotechem, and the ears of your sons and daughters, v'haviu elai, and bring them to me. Okay, so there's the first thing Aaron says is, take off the jewelry from your wives and children and bring it to me. All right, so it's a delaying tactic, probably. That who knows how long that's going to take, and maybe Moses will show up in the meantime. So verse 3, Vayit parku kol ha'am et nizmei hazahav. The whole people took off the gold rings, asher ba'oznehem, that are in their ears, vayaviu el Aharon, and they brought it to Aaron. So we don't know how long this took, but they did it pretty quickly. Vayikach mi adam, he took it from their hands. Vayatzar oto bacheret, and cast it in a mold. Vayaasehu egel masecha, and made it into a molten calf. Vayomru, and they said, Eile Elohecha Yisrael. Now, it's in the plural, but translate, because it's one golden calf that is made. This is your God, O Israel, Asher He'elucha me'eretz Mitzrayim, who brought you up out of the land of Israel, land of Egypt. Vayar Aharon, Vayiven Mizbeach. Aaron saw and built an altar in front of it. Vayikra Aharon Vayomar, and Aaron proclaimed and said, Chag l'Adonai machar. There's a festival to God, a feast to God tomorrow. Okay, so there's lots of commentary on this. Clearly, the straightforward sense of this is that Aaron is culpable here, right? So we were just told in Tissa, last week's portion, again, if the Torah portion goes in chronologically in the order presented here, and the rabbi's saying it's not, but if it's going in order, Aaron and his sons were last week were designated as the priests of Israel. So Aaron and his sons. So Aaron's the high priest. His sons are officiating priests with him. So they were just proclaimed by God to be the priests of Israel, right? So how could a priest of Israel, who is told exactly what kind of sacrifices to offer, how could he come up with this that goes clearly against the Ten Commandments. Don't fashion another God before me. How could Aaron do this? And how is Aaron seen as such a positive role model to the Jewish people? In fact, at Friday night services, we've been looking at Pirkei Avot, and 2 weeks ago we saw Hillel's statement that we should be like the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace. Whoa, where does he get that from? When Aaron's main thing that he does right here is fashion this golden molten calf. So now we have to take a look below the line to get some understanding here, how the rabbis totally reframe how Aaron is to be understood in the story. Okay, so this is not the first time. Remember way back in Genesis, when Jacob clearly appears to be lying to his father, dressing up as Esau, saying, "It is I, Esau, your oldest son," and how the rabbis transform that Hebrew phrase to say, "It is I, comma, Esau is your oldest son," so that Jacob can't be seen, God forbid, as lying to his father. So the rabbis change the words or change the punctuation so that Jacob doesn't come across as a liar. What do they do with Aaron here so that Aaron doesn't come across as an idolater? That the high priest should not be seen as an idolater. So let's look below the line on page 530 and then especially page 531 to see what the rabbis do here. The people who only a few weeks earlier had been slaves in Egypt, where they had witnessed Egyptian idolatry, right? It's 3 months. Well, it's really 2 months. It's the third month after leaving Egypt. They left in Nisan, the 15th of Nisan. Let's say it's the 6th of Sivan when they hear the Ten Commandments. So then it's 40 days later. So it's another month and a half when this happens. So a month and a half after the 6th of Sivan, you're the end of Tammuz. You're the end of Tammuz, the beginning of Elul. So it's like 4 months, 5 months after leaving Egypt, okay? Could not comprehend a God without physical form. So it's, even though they've had this awesome experience of God at Mount Sinai, they still are in their default of what God is supposed to look like in God having a physical form, as the second commandment called on them to do. Moses, so then there's a parenthetical note here. Moses later in verse 11 refers to your people whom you delivered from the land of Egypt, as if to remind God of the influences to which they had been subjected there. Moses even reminds God, remember, you're dealing with a people that had just been in Egypt for hundreds of years. The Midrash compares the situation to that of a man who bought his son a store in a notoriously corrupt neighborhood and then blames the son for having been corrupted there, right? You can't, if you open a store or a business in a bad neighborhood, you can't blame the influence that would happen to the son. So the people needed a visible, tangible symbol of God's presence. That's what our commentary is suggesting from understanding the story. They had just come from Egypt, where everything, even death, was rendered visible through pyramids and mummies. It was extremely hard for them to grasp the idea that the greatest reality of all is intangible, right? It takes a while for the new understanding of God, of being abstract and unseen, to become an instinctive thought. It takes generations to teach that and to learn that and to incorporate that into your consciousness. The text seems to imply that at least some of the people who saw Moses as an embodiment of God wanted the golden calf to replace the vanished Moses, without whom they felt abandoned. According to Hirsch, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, the people did not understand that God had taken the initiative in reaching down to them believing that Moses had the power to summon God. Without Moses, how would they ever be able to experience God's presence again? So that's a dilemma here, and why this golden calf story is happening. That's how the commentary is framing this for us. Now, Aaron is consistently portrayed in Jewish lore as a peacemaker and a conciliator, right? That I just mentioned Hillel's statement: "Be like the disciples of Aaron, to love peace and pursue peace." Moses was the lawgiver, proclaiming standards and prohibitions, the prophet who denounced those who fell short of those standards. Aaron, in his priestly aspect, met and accepted people where they were. Moses proclaimed, "You shall not." Aaron welcomed people who brought their purification offerings to atone for their violations. Legends tell of Aaron's efforts to reconcile feuding individuals. In this instance, however, Aaron's inclination to accept rather than challenge popular will led to misfortune. So leading to misfortune is such a great understatement from this commentary here. So this is the beginning of understanding why, let's compare this to the news today. Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York. Okay, I'm not making any political statement, just saying there are 3 charges now. 3 women have come forward for with sexual harassment charges against the governor, right? There are people calling for his resignation, but the Democratic Party is not yet. They're calling for an investigation, but they're not calling for his resignation yet. So it all depends on how you want to view it, and how we let events slide or not, call for an immediate replacement, or understand. So here, the rabbis are more in the conciliatory mode in understanding Aaron here, probably because God let Aaron continue on as the high priest instead of punishing. God does not punish Aaron in this story at all. The people who worshiped the golden calf are punished. In fact, they're killed by the Levites. Anybody who was dancing in front of the golden calf, we'll see later in the chapter, were killed. But Aaron, who made the golden calf, is not punished at all. So the rabbis have to deal with that fact that God doesn't punish Aaron, and therefore that gives them the permission to kind of whitewash Aaron's role in the whole story. And now look at verse 5 in the commentary below the line on page 531. Here is the extent to which they're doing this. So in an effort to minimize Aaron's culpability, the Talmud vowelizes, I call it vocalizes, the Hebrew words for "he built an altar." So we have to look at the Hebrew here. Look up at verse 5 in the Hebrew. Vayar Aharon. Aaron saw, Vayiven Mizbeach. So this already, he fashions the golden calf, and now he builds an altar. Vayiven Mizbeach. Okay, so the vowels in those letters, under those letters, tell us that we pronounce those 2 words, Vayiven Mizbeach. Okay, just based on how the Hebrew is written and the accepted pronunciation of it, the vowels were put in. We have to understand, when we write Hebrew today, like if you buy a newspaper in Israel today, or any novel, any book, anything written, you see a sign on the street, there are no vowels in the Hebrew. Hebrew is really written without vowels. You don't need the vowels to read the Hebrew. There's an accepted pronunciation based on how you write the words. Okay, sometimes you'll see a dot above or next to a vav to tell you, oh, pronounce that word this way. So every now and then you'll see a dot here and there to help you understand this is the way you should pronounce it, so you make sense of what that sentence or phrase is saying. So we have the vowels here, so we think that this is the way that we're supposed to, everybody reads it the same way, but there are other ways that we can read these 2 words. So down below again, so we have the vowels that say Vayiven Mizbeach. So the rabbis changed the vowels so that they mean he understood because of the one who was killed. So in other words, instead of reading it Vayiven Mizbeach, Vayavein Mizavuach, right? So if you look at the two Hebrew words again, the first one, Vayiven, could be Vayavein, he understood, Mizavuach, from the sacrificed one. You could read it that way. The only problem is under the bet in Mizbeach, you'd have to have the diagonal 3-dot diagonal vowel. And though that is a vowel that is used, it's really one of the most uncommon vowels, because the way to say the oo sound most commonly is the letter vav with the dot next to it. You could do it with the 3 diagonal dots, but it's more commonly with a vav there. So it's unusual to read it zavuach without the vav, but you could. And in this case, then the rabbis create a whole scenario. What is the scenario? The Talmudic sages envision an episode in which a leader who stood up to the mob, Hur, referred to in Exodus 17:10 and 24:14, was killed by them. Okay, so way back, Exodus 17, in the battle against the Amalekites, Joshua is leading the battle, and Moses is standing on a hill, and you have 2 people holding up his arms, Aaron and Hur. Okay, and then you never hear of Hur again, except for chapter 24, as one of these elders who go up the Mount Sinai with Moses up there. That's it. You never hear from Hur again, but he's an important figure. If he's he's one of the people holding up Moses's arms. So who was this Hur and what happened to him? So, here's a perfect place to put Hur in the story. All these people are confronting Aaron, build us a golden calf. Hur said, whoa, hold on there. We're not going to do this. Believe in God, wait for Moses. And they kill Hur. And because they killed Hur, Aaron said, I'm not going to get myself killed. I'm going to accede to the wishes of the mob and are going to fashion this golden calf. So in this interpretation, the commentary goes on, Aaron pretended to accede to the people's demands, not solely to save his life, but to prevent the people from committing another grave sin. So the rabbis, in their effort to explain whatever happened to Hur, and their effort to whitewash Aaron's activities, come up with this scenario by revocalizing the 2 words Vayiven Mizbeach to Vayavein Mizavuach, and create this story about how Hur was the hero trying to defend God's good name, and Moses as well, and he was slaughtered for it. And Aaron, ever the conciliatory person, was now we have an explanation of why he so readily built the golden calf. So in just the moment or two that we have left, I just want to say, clearly the story is made up out of total whole cloth. So that's perfectly acceptable to understand it that way. And again, in Orthodox circles, midrash that the rabbis come up with is Torah. So that if the rabbis came up with this version of the story, then that's the way we have to understand it. In non-Orthodox circles, no, I would never say that about midrash. It sheds light on the rabbinic perspective of the Torah, especially. It's one thing for the rabbis to derive law. I'm not questioning that. I'm questioning the stories they come up. So, and the lessons they teach. That we have the right to question that. So, and understand that here, what the rabbis are trying to do here is make sense of something that did not make sense to them. Aaron should have been punished. Aaron should not have been allowed to do this. Aaron should not have been allowed to to stay in his role as high priest after doing something so grievous like this, creating an idol when the entire people heard that you're not supposed to have an idol when God exists. And so the only way for them to explain this is to come up with this story. So if we understand that context, it helps us understand a little bit better why Aaron gets away with it, and why the rabbis are doing what they do. So it just this is a perfect example of how the rabbis use midrash to make sense of the Torah and to teach further lessons about how we understand the Torah today. So I need to stop here for today. I hope everybody has a good rest of the day. Stay safe and healthy, and wish everybody a good rest of the week as well.
Donut, yes.
Bye.
Brouכים
Thank
tiyeh.
you.
Thank you.